Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Evoke Therapy Program's broadcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy, and today is Thursday, December 1st. We're finally into December 2022. For those of you that might be new to this format, if you're watching live, you can submit questions or topics at any time during the broadcast. Malia, who's moderating for me this evening, she'll pass those on to me when there's space in the broadcast for me to address them. I think we have about 3 or 4 submitted questions, so we'll get to those first. You can always send feedback, questions, topic requests to intensives@evoketherapy.com. And those also, if you send in questions, those will be queued up to start off and to be prioritized during the next Q&A broadcast. If you are a family member or a friend or a sibling of an Evoke family, please let me know your age and relationship to the client. That just helps me make sure that I'm clear about who I'm speaking to in terms of who's my audience. So that's always helpful. So with that, before I get into that, actually, I'm going to tell you about the next conscious parenting workshop. We have our second one tomorrow. We had our first two fill up really quickly, went wonderfully during our first day. So it's 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. We're keeping the group small so that you can interact. It's not just going to be lecture and didactic, although there'll be some of that, but it's also interactive in the sense that you get to present your issues, questions, kind of your case study of your family, and I'll be happy to address that, give you a little flavor of what it would be like to be in therapy with me. So with that announcement, I'm going to get into the questions that have come up. The first question is the conscious parenting course appropriate for parents of adults 24 and 26-year-olds? Absolutely. Ironically, the conscious parenting course would even be appropriate for non-parents because we're really just talking about relationships and our own background, our own family of origin programming, and learning to evaluate that, to kind of unravel it all and understand how it's impacting us today. But of course, a 24-year-old and the 26-year-old child are perfect qualifiers for a parent to join the class. Just as a side note, I have 4 children, 28 and 29 are my oldest two. And the parenting lessons that I'm still practicing with my 15-year-old are every bit as relevant as they are for my 28 and 29-year-old, 15-year-old, and my 20-year-old for that matter. So yes, you're welcome. You don't have to have a specific issue or a specific qualifier, but 24 and 6 would very much qualify you to fit right into the conscious parenting workshop. So thanks for that question. Somebody asked, oh, and then somebody also asked just me privately about the parenting, excuse me, the couples workshop that we have coming up next year. That I'll be, in fact, I'll just click on that slide right now so that you can see it. February 1st through 5th. So if you've been defining you, this is going to be familiar to you. In fact, you're welcome to not sign up for this if you've done a finding you because it's going to be very similar. We're going to take as many as 4 couples, so it'll be a full workshop, just like our flagship Finding You workshop. And we're going to go into each person's family of origin. And then we're going to go into present day challenges. Of course, what's unique about this is that all the questions, the education, even the role plays, especially the ones that we call current day pieces of work, meaning not just the family of origin, but what's going on current day, can be helpful as you watch other couples go through it, as you hear from other couples. I think one of the most underrated aspects of our intensive therapy workshops is that you learn as much by watching other people do their work and the feedback that you get from your peers in the group, let alone your therapist, which in this case will be me. You get as much value from them as you do from the stuff that I'll be teaching. So this is a workshop that I will be running that will be for couples only. I will say that if you're in a moment of high conflict, this is probably not the right workshop for you. This is a workshop where you have to feel safe enough, at least for the first half of it, to be willing, and your partner also, to be able to do some of your own therapy work in front of each other without feeling too guarded, without feeling too threatened by it. So, of course, the pond or the water doesn't have to be perfectly still and smooth. This is not just for couples that are happy, that just want to come and celebrate their magical love connection together. But this is real work. And the rule out would be high conflict. The rule out would be if you or your partner feel at a significant level reserved because you don't feel safe with them. If If it's difficult, for example, to engage in any conversation that has emotional content, this is not going to be the right one for you. And because the first half of it, like our finding you, very much like our finding you, is so much based on our history, your history, you have to be able to be at a place in your relationship where you can be patient and wait for that second half of it. If you have done in finding you, I'm not telling you it's a rule out, but there's going to be repetitive exercises for you. Now, why that's not a rule out is, as you might imagine, and if you've had the experience, you can do the same pieces of work over and over again around the same subject, and each version of the work can bring to you new awareness and new depth. Right? You can continue to peel the onion back, as it were. In addition to the fact that there's an onion peeling process that can happen when you revisit a piece of work, one of the things that we have a lot of excitement around is being able to witness your partner's work can be very healing for you. I wrote a post yesterday on my social media that said that in marriage, you know, for a marriage to be successful, you must learn to fall in love with your partner's dilemma over and over again. And the spirit, the energy of that post is what I'm describing here. Knowing I've been in couples therapy with my wife where it goes from us talking about our conflicts and about decisions we have to make as co-parent to just feeling her woundedness, to feeling her vulnerable inner child show up in the session. And of course, for her, that was uncomfortable and risky and took some courage. But for me, it's so compelling to see the root of what vexes my partner, like her dilemma. And similarly, if I can get into a safe enough space to share my inner child work outside of the context of being married to her, she's drawn to that inner child. She can better understand how the defenses, the nonsense, the repetitive arguments that we get into with each other are tied back to this wounded child, to this family of origin programming, to the messages, the ideas, the stories that I'm carrying around in my head all the time. So that's a little bit about what that looks like. If you want to talk more, call our admissions folks and ask them questions there. And I'm also happy to get involved if talking to them doesn't yield the answers that you want and you want to further discussion. So that's a little bit about that. The next question is, I'm wondering how to forgive myself for sending my son away. I did it to save him from his risky teenage behavior. He's 22 years old now and was able to graduate from high school and start college, though he is not finished yet. He can't let go of the pain he experienced at aftercare. I want to help him, but the guilt and shame is overwhelming to everyone in our family and is blocking us from moving forward to healthy adult relationships. You know, one of my favorite movies about forgiving yourself, perhaps of all time, is a movie called The Mission, starring Robert De Niro, and Jeremy Lyons, and Liam Neeson. Great cast about the the invasion of South America and Central America by the Europeans and the missionary work that they were doing. And I won't get into all of it. It's a beautiful movie. It won a lot of Academy Awards. It may have won Best Picture. I know it won Best Soundtrack. It's a beautiful soundtrack, but it's a wonderful story about self-forgiveness. I'm just giving you that as an aside. I used to show it in treatment programs all the time when I was younger. It's been a long time since I've showed it, but I love it. Self-forgiveness is something that takes practice. You know, I've said more than a couple of times this week talking to people that we are cured or healed in the same way that we were injured in the first place. And what I mean by that is when we grew up in a context, in a family, in a culture where guilt was something that was encouraged, something that was fostered, something that was even put to us as an ideal to strive for, that in essence we were supposed to feel really bad about being human and excuse me and making mistakes. That we were supposed to feel bad about things that we did that hurt other people that we care about because we were taught that bad feeling was our conscience, that bad feeling was needed fuel. that would lead to change. And I'm here to tell all of you right now, those ideas are lies. That's not what we know. And the way that you're healed from that is by being around somebody who's compassionate, who's non judgmental, who can, as I like to describe it, see and hold your horrible, rotten self and love you and care about you and understand no matter what decisions you've made that hurt you or hurt other people, that you can learn to forgive yourself. Therapy is a kind of confession. And sometimes it takes a long time to confess because we don't even know that that's the process. It takes a while for clients often to tell me when I've seen them in private one-on-one therapy. It takes a long time for them to get to the point where they start sharing things with me that they're afraid that I might judge them for. Sometimes it takes years. And it doesn't all come at once. You don't let down that wall and everything comes out. It comes out little bit by little bit. But when they do take that risk and share something with me, and they receive a different kind of response. I talk about this in the Audacity to Be You. When they receive a different kind of response, we're starting to create a reparative experience that stands in direct opposition to the way that they've been treated at other times when they made mistakes, when they hurt people. So the answer to the question on a philosophical level is you heal the wounds around toxic guilt, around guilt and shame, the same way in which those wounds were created, by spending time with somebody. But in the case of a good enough therapist, the therapist responds to you with non-judgment, without anxiety, without fear that you're not going to have it figured out or get it automatically or immediately. Somebody who's patient. And it takes time. Sometimes listening to the podcast, sometimes reading a book can be help always augment our work. And I recommend that you do that. If you, the person writing this question, has not read The Audacity to Be You, I spent a lot of energy in writing that book and dispelling this myth about guilt. Really trying to kill this idea that we're taught in the culture. And I know I'm not picking on somebody here, but I'm going to tell you a story that all of you will have some reference point to, so it might be helpful. And I'm not picking on the subject of the story, but I'm going to talk about Brene Brown for a little bit. Not only were we taught it in our culture, in our background, but Brene Brown, who's become the most popular self-help writer in the United States, if not the world right now. And her second TED Talk, the two that made her famous, in her second one, that was given in a local area at a Houston TED conference. She says, and I talk about this in The Journey of the Heroic Parent, she asked the audience, she says, she makes this assertion. She says, shame is associated with mental illness and addiction. And guilt, she says, is associated with health, which is not true. And she said, for example, she asked the audience rhetorically, although they raised their hands. She said, if you had done something to me and you felt guilty about it, how many of you would be willing to apologize? And the camera pans to the audience, and all the audience members, in a casual glance, raised their hand. And I thought, that's not my experience of guilt. That's not my experience of my guilt or other people's guilt. When people feel guilty, they just as often run from accountability as they do when they feel shame, which is a very visceral, instinctive desire to hide, to cover up, to run away. But guilt can have the same impact. So you have to decondition yourself. So there's not going to be one idea that I can give you, one quote that I can give you, although all of those ideas and quotes can be a part of your recovery, your healing. But the fact of the matter is, it's going to take deconditioning, unlearning, and that takes time. And the fact that you're here tonight, well, you might not be here tonight. This might be a pre-submitted question, but if you're listening, means that you're on that path. And then I'll talk more practically about forgiveness. All you can do is hold space for your son's pain. If it becomes abusive, if his expression of pain becomes abusive or merely overwhelming for you, because becoming abusive is not some objective standard. Nobody gets to decide if it's overwhelming, but if you're the listener, if you're the audience to his sharing, to his expressing of pain. So let's just set that aside for a second, that you get to end any conversation at any time that you want to. You have that psychological permission to do that. But first, the idea is he's allowed to feel pain. And if you made a mistake in choosing the aftercare, it sounds like the wilderness was not the crux of his pain, although that can happen too. Absolutely can happen too. The way to help somebody move through it is to hold space for it, to allow it to be. I remember years ago when my son was at a parent conference parent group that I was hosting, and he had to leave just a little bit before it ended. And one of the parents asked him just before he left, they said, did you forgive your parents for sending you to wilderness? Because he went to wilderness when he was a young teenager. And he hesitated and hemmed and hawed and stuttered, almost as if he didn't understand the question. And after he left, I explained to that gentleman who asked the question, that audience, that it wouldn't have built up into a resentment for him, because I didn't need him not to be angry about it. And I also didn't need to be right about it. I didn't send my son to wilderness and my third child, my other son, to a private pursuits program because I was right. I sent it because it's it's all I knew that I could do. That I wasn't able to give them what they needed, and I asked for some help, and so I sent them somewhere to get some help, to get the things that they needed, that we couldn't seem to give them enough of. And so if they come back and they say that was stupid, that was a waste, that was a mistake, my response is, okay, I'm sorry. And my internal dialogue is, it was the last thing that I wanted to do, and I was overwhelmed. I was exhausted. I got to this point of surrender where I asked for help. And if I made a wrong step, see, this is not too much different from any of your child's pain. I've been thinking so much lately about this idea, especially because it came up in a conversation where my daughter expressed some sadness and hurt for me raising my voice at her. And then right after I apologized, she said, "But you do it all the time." And that was the hard part to hear. And I didn't want to hear it. And I've shared on this podcast, this broadcast, a handful of times that um, I spent a few minutes trying to talk myself out of the truth of her statement. But after I came to my senses and shared with my wife what had just happened between me and my daughter, and I said to my wife, I said, I just want to run away sometimes. I just want to move to a cabin in the mountains so I don't hurt anybody anymore, so I don't hurt my children, so I don't hurt you. And as I heard myself saying this out loud, which is a normal idea to have when you feel the guilt that you feel. As I heard myself talk about wanting to run away, I realized, I came to, and I thought, I'm not going to run away. I'm going to stay present. I'm going to show up again, and I'm going to show her that I'm an adult, that I'm mature enough, that I can tolerate the pain of this little mini ego death, this failure, this this human quality of mine that has leaked onto her, has bled onto her, so to speak. And I've just become aware of, that's what your healing does. That's what your dealing with guilt does. That's what you're sorting out your own shame, your own background does. It doesn't make you perfect, although you do improve, but it gives you an earned attachment. That's the technical language. A sense of self, a sense of strength, a feeling that you're okay. Not because you're great, but because you're okay. You're human and you're okay. You're brilliant and you're stupid. You're beautiful and you're ugly. You're smart and you're dumb. You're generous and you're stingy. You're wise and you're ignorant. You're talented and you're all of it. That's what That's what the outcome of therapy is. And so I recommitted to saying, I'm going to stay present. I'm not going to instinctually, run away, fight or flight, right? The other version is I could yell back and argue and debate and dismiss and gaslight her to try to make my guilt go away that way, to try to convince her that I'm a good guy. And if I can get her to agree, then I'm off the hook, so to speak. But instead, I'm just going to stay present as an imperfect, fallible person who struggles with guilt sometimes. But I'm not going to let that guilt drive me to a trauma response, to a fight or a flight. And that's what my children need. And that's what your children need. And that's what we needed as children. Not perfect parents, but parents that were committed to taking care of themselves so the child didn't have to. And if the parent doesn't learn to take care of themselves in the way that I'm describing, and this goes for you and this goes for me, then the child will feel the obligation to try to take care of you and it will crush them. They'll have to hide their true self. And when you hide your true self, you leak out your feelings and behaviors that we call addiction and mental illness. They come out sideways. But when the pathway is clear for you to feel them because you have capable adult selves around you. If you don't have those, you find a therapist someday who's a capable adult self and you tell the truth. You tell the truth about yourself, even though some of the things that you'll say you have been taught that you shouldn't think or feel or be. And if your therapist gets up, makes a mistake or screws up, and you have the courage to tell them, and the reason that that's courageous is because we fully expect the therapist to respond to the way that our parents and others did in our childhood, to defend it, to argue it, to make it about us, to make us the problem. But if you have a good enough therapist, an adequate therapist is what I call a good enough therapist. If you have a good enough therapist, they honor the courage that it took to share your anger toward them, your hurt. They don't need to be good or right. They welcome it. They validate it. And you immediately feel this release and you begin to recognize over time in this kind of a pattern with this different kind of person that the things you believe about you didn't come from you. They're yours now, but they didn't start with you. They came from your context. So you change your context when you grow up and you find somebody who can sit with you and be with you in a different kind of way. We are wounded and healed in relationships. We are wounded in relationships and we are healed in relationships. And it doesn't happen overnight, just like our wounding didn't happen overnight. Thank you for that question. My 16-year-old son is getting involved in legally reselling marijuana. Illegally, I'm sorry. Big difference. My 16-year-old son is getting involved in illegally reselling marijuana. And we suspect also electronics possibly stolen by others. Besides enforcing boundaries at home and explaining consequences, how can one help? We've had multiple conversations, but low self-esteem seems to be at the root of a lot of the behaviors in therapy. My son doesn't disclose all he is doing. Any ideas? Thanks. I mean, again, the work is the same. If you come to me with work about your marriage, it's the same work. Or work about your son who's in treatment or who went to treatment 10 years ago, it's the same work. Or the work about around your 16-year-old son. So the first answer, I have a few. The first answer to the question is the work is the same. It's the work that I talk about all the time, which is do your work. Get clear. Especially in a question like this, I don't know the answer to what you should do with regard to your son and boundaries, but I know the work is yours. I don't tell people to send their children to treatment or not. I really don't. I really don't. What I do is help them get clear on what they feel and need and believe. I help them confront trauma and fear responses that they have and how those are blocking them from creativity and wisdom and wise forethought. And then they make the decision that they need to make because it has to come from you. So, so if you need help, Al-Anon, Codependence Anonymous, Adult Children of Alcoholics, Families Anonymous, those are free places you can go. Get a therapist and find a therapist who doesn't tell you what to do, who doesn't have the word or the energy should in them, who doesn't think that they know your truth, but is more interested at you finding your truth, discovering it for yourself. And then when you find that truth, the decisions come out of that. So, if you've already got the boundaries, you're talking about your own work, getting clear, what you can and can't control. I can tell you, I have made, and I'm talking about my wise self, not my triggered trauma self. My wise self has made some very different decisions with my children at different stages of my life and their lives. And so I don't have one generic solution or technique. I don't have an answer or a path. That's why when people quote me and they say, Brad would tell you to do this or tell you to do that, my answer is, no, I wouldn't. Unless, of course, the answer is Brad tells you to do your own work, then yeah, I would tell you that. But I'm not going to advise you on the decision. Find your boundaries, find yourself, find out what's important, set your priorities, understand what trauma and fear you have in your life that's blocking you from your wisdom. Understand and unravel your codependency because that's a result of complex trauma, attachment trauma as a child. And as those areas get more clear, more grounded, you'll make the right decision because it'll be yours. But it's difficult and it takes a little bit of time. So thank you for the question. Again, just like the last person, the fact that you're here asking the question means that you're on the path. And my whole goal in all of these broadcasts, my whole goal, I know I talk about the same themes and I might have different topics, but a lot of the same themes come up in a lot of these. It's because it's a certain kind of sensibility. In Star Wars, which is my favorite myth, modern myth, in Star Wars, this sensibility is called the Force. And the dark side refers to our trauma responses, a place from hurt, fear, and anger. George Lucas was making a movie. That's a fact. But he wasn't making it from nowhere. It didn't come out of nowhere. He specifically was looking at Joseph Campbell, at Jungian principles, because Joseph Campbell and Jung are overlap quite a bit. He was looking at what Jung called the collective unconscious, which is the collective unconscious shows up in our myths and our stories that endure. So I'll take, for example, the Odyssey. The reason that we have the Odyssey today, the Odyssey wasn't the only story or collection of stories being told hundreds of years BC. It wasn't. But it endured because enough people felt that way. It was the collective values, ideas of the culture of ancient Greece. So the collective unconscious, think about the dream you have at night. Your dream, I love this idea. Your dream is your personal myth. But when certain themes are shared by a large group of people in a culture or society, those dreams become their myths, their stories. Star Wars, Rocky, um, The Truman Show, The Matrix. I happen to be honing in on some very vivid myths that have a very similar pattern of thinking, a very specific version of the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell identified as something, some algorithm, some pattern that all these myths show and share. So, um, I don't even know where I was talking about, why I got off on that subject, but it's something I love to talk about. That's probably why. Keep going. Somebody writes, can you speak on self-sabotage? I'm interested in knowing why it occurs and what, if anything, I could do to help my son who I think does this. Also, I would like to know how to continue to be close with my son. He doesn't seem to be close with me or his family unless he wants something. I have boundaries. It's just frustrating that he says he never wants to talk to us and I'm just letting him be, but wonder if our relationship is fleeting. You have a couple of really good, deep questions there. I'm going to split it in two. I'm going to talk about self sabotage, then I'm going to talk about the closeness. I don't use the phrase self sabotage. I know what it means, but I'll tell you why I don't use it very often. I don't use it because self sabotage, the idea that we see it as self sabotage is in logical language. If you've studied philosophy and have studied logical fallacies, it's a red herring, it's a distraction. Yes, on the surface, he or she or they, the child, seem to be, or anybody, seem to be working at cross purposes. Everybody knows the phrase, cut off your nose to spite your face. So on the surface, it looks like you're sabotaging something that is a given that everybody would want to have. And on the surface, that is true. But there's something deeper that is fueling it, that it serves. And so that's where we need to get beneath the content, the consciousness, and into the unconscious. So let's say, for example, I'll use a simple example that a child is in our program, in our wilderness therapy program, and is set to graduate soon. Let's say that that's the case. Um, and then they start acting out toward the end with some small but obvious decisions that are going to have some consequences. It could be said that they're sabotaging themselves, that maybe they're afraid to leave and they don't want to leave. I mean, that actually is, I just answered the question. On the surface, it looks like they're getting themselves in trouble, but underneath that, they're afraid of leaving. When I was in high school, I mean, I could give you a lot of examples from my life, but one very vivid, silly example was I had a world history class, I think it was world history with Mr. Antonor, a great, creative, passionate teacher. Loved him and looked up to him, but I struggled. And at one point in the class, I purposely got all the answers on a test wrong, and 15 of the questions were true and false. So that means I had to know all 15 questions and the right answer to get them all wrong. And then there was some multiple choice. I got a 0 on the test. Turned it in. I came back the next class period. Mr. Antonor asked me to stay afterwards, and he sat me down. And he said, I graded your test. And I said, okay. He said, you got a 0. And I said, oh, okay. He said, Brad, there's no way you could have randomly gotten those 15 questions wrong, those true false questions. In fact, you had to know the answers to choose the wrong answer. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea. And he said, I think you do. And I said, I may have just gotten even more belligerent about it. And he said, I'm going to give you an A for this test as a sign of good faith, I suppose, or that he saw me, he wanted to. But I was so guarded and so defended. I dropped out of high school soon after this, as a matter of fact. So yeah, it looked like I was sabotaging myself, but really what I was doing was I was so worried that I couldn't make this teacher that I liked, the one teacher that I liked most, proud. I wanted his attention. I wanted his affection as a male role model because I didn't have a father in my life, that I sank my own boat so that I could stay in control of things. So there are an innumerable numbers of examples that I could give in life, but you've got to look deeper and see, what is the self-sabotage serving? What other need is it serving? And that's where the truth is. Something else is being served. Find that thing and you'll understand why he or she is self-sabotaging. In terms of being close, here's the thing with teenagers. They don't want to be close to us. It's not even developmentally a typical thing. It's expected. So during the teenage years, the teenager kind of goes into an emotional hibernation state. If the parent can tolerate it, maintain their boundaries, maintain some pattern of kindness and warmth along with those boundaries, but give the child space, you'll connect to the child. What he's aware of is that you need him to open up. You need him to share. You need a hug. You need his attention and affection. You need conversation with him. And he doesn't want to take care of you anymore. He's exhausted by that. He doesn't want it to be about your needs all the time. That's what my best guess is about this, because teenagers, I said to my wife a while ago, I said one of the reasons, it's not the only reasons, but one of the reasons why our teenage daughter likes me driving her to school the most is because I don't talk to her. And when I don't talk to her, you know what happens? She talks to me more. She feels safer. She doesn't feel the pull to take care of my emotional needs. So many parents that I've dealt with, I myself am guilty of this and still will be. They confuse their needs with the child need. He doesn't need to be close to you right now. But if you can hold that in mind and tolerate these 5 or 6 years of hibernation, on the other side of it, he will have felt seen. In fact, probably in the middle of it, he'll feel seen. And you've got to go get your emotional needs met somewhere else. They pull away. I mean, evolutionarily speaking, it's time for them to prepare to leave. And if they don't become successful as independent creatures, they will die. So the instinct to push away is built into their DNA. And we're thinking like adults with fully developed prefrontal cortex and our own background of trauma, of closeness, of abandonment from our parents, of all of that. And we're asking something from the child that they were never meant to give. So you take care of yourself. Again, you take care of yourself. You hold space for the child. When my therapist said to me in a therapy session, right before my son went away for 2 years, he went on a church mission for himself. And the meeting before, at this point, I was not a member of his church. And he went on this mission. And I was just sad that he was leaving. It was for a good thing, something he wanted to do. And my therapist said, he needs to get as far away from you as he can. And first of all, I chuckled at the truth of it. And immediately I thought, oh, I know what to do now. I know how to love my son in this next phase. Let him go. I know how to love my 15-year-old daughter, 14-year-old daughter. Her birthday comes up in a couple of weeks. I know how to hold space for her by letting her not talk, by me occupying, keeping myself busy and happy so I don't need something from her. A child's impulse to care for the parent's needs, and all of this is unconscious, so that the parent won't abandon them, is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It is. It is the pestilence of our time, and not just our time. It goes back many generations. The drama of the gifted child is what I'm talking about. So the minute that my therapist reminded me that my son needed to pull away, and I could allow him to leave, right? I read a quote recently where it said, "Healthy families allow people to leave and come back without a lot of drama." And I know I'm talking about it in a big example, and you might be worried about some things that are going on with your son, which is another issue. But the social engagement, the conversation, the opening up to you, the reassuring you of your anxiety by breaking the silence and having a conversation with you, that's all for you. You've got to go somewhere else and take care of all of that, so that when you show up to the child, you're not asking for something from them that they're not supposed to give in the first place, and you can be there for them. Self-care and love and capacity are all connected. We have to take care of ourselves. And if we don't, as my wife says, if you show up to the relationship with your child hungry, you'll eat the child. so you get fed somewhere else. And of course, if there are problematic behaviors, that's a different discussion. Boundaries and interventions, of course, can occur in that context, but I still think there's a truth to this, even in those situations. No further questions at the moment, it says. All right, I'll go into upcoming events and then I'll take one question at the end or two if they come in. Like I described earlier, February 1st, I'll be running a multi-couples Finding You intensive, February 1st through 5th. February 24th will be our third installment of the Conscious Parenting Workshop. I'm excited. Number 2 is tomorrow. And then I'm also going to be teaching a masterclass to professionals on attachment-based therapy, which is Evoke's model and approach. Contact intensives at Evoke Therapy for any information or to register. My books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, are available on Amazon and Audible. I'm the one who narrated The Audacity to Be You. I didn't do The Journey of the Heroic Parent. If you want to do a deep dive into your work, the best thing I can say that you can spend your time, your resources, your money on is Finding You. The next one is January 18th through 22nd. There's one spot left. If it fills, we'll open up another one. But if you want to get into it now. February 22nd is the one after that. We also have an online offering. It's half the time and less than a third of the cost, and you don't have to travel over a weekend, January 27th through 29th. Contact intensives at evoketherapy.com for more information. We have support groups for our wilderness families, both alumni and current families. December 8th, a week from tonight, is the next offering at 6:30 p.m. Once a month, we have an alumni meeting December 27th, just for alumni of our wilderness program, parents of our wilderness program clients. December 27th at 6:30 p.m. is the next offering. And then for our intensives program group, for all of our alumni, we have a meeting once a month for support, December 13th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Contact Malia at evoketherapy.com to register or for no information. If you want an attachment-based coach, contact coaching at evoketherapy.com. Our therapists can provide individual coaching, life coaching, marital coaching, co-parenting, parenting coaching. All of that's involved. Virtual, from the comfort of your own computer, your own home, your own phone. Contact coaching at evoketherapy.com. We have pursuit trips for young adults and families, totally customized with therapeutic staff, customized and designed by you with our staff all over the world, Utah, the Far East, South America, Central America, Canada, Hawaii, anywhere you want to go. The Dominican Republic is where my son did his. Contact Sarah at evoketherapy.com for more information. As I said earlier, we ask all current parents to go to 6 12-step support groups, any combination of Al-Anon, CODA, Families Anonymous, or Adult Children. Just go to their websites. You can also go to refugerecovery.org and NAMI.org, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, to get free classes and resources in your local community. All of these broadcasts are available on Spotify or your favorite podcast app. Just search Finding You and Evoke Therapy Podcast, and you'll find us on any podcast app. You can also go to soundcloud.com on your computer and find us by searching there. You can also go to our YouTube channel, Evoke's YouTube channel, and you can watch the video presentations with the slides there. You can find Evoke Therapy programs and me, Dr. Brad Reedy, on Twitter and Instagram using the handles at Evoke Therapy and at Dr. Brad Reedy. Also, you can find Evoke Intensives on Instagram using the handle at Evoke Therapy Intensives. On Facebook, you can find us by searching either Evoke Therapy programs or Evoke Therapy Intensives. And then our Evoke Therapy blog has new information and content each week, curated by Malia, and she does a wonderful job, contributed to by all of our staff. At the end of the year, if you want to give back, if you want to get that last donation, these are our partner programs that offer wilderness therapy and other treatment for young people and families. ChooseMentalHealth.org, Sky'sTheLimitFund.org, or EvokeFamilyFoundation.org. With all of those, you can earmark, if it so be your desire, you can earmark your funds, your donation to go to somebody to an Evoke program. We offer, we match whatever these organizations are giving for a scholarship so that we reduce the price even further for folks attending this program. So if you want to give back to somebody who can't afford treatment otherwise, those are the places that I would send you. Looks like there are no further questions. My next broadcast will be next week, next Tuesday, December 6th at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. I'm going to be talking about winter programming and also the holidays at Evoke. It looks like I have one more question that's come in. I'll answer that as a as a last bite before we close tonight. How do you love your authentic self and still love your child if they are malcontented, steal, and lie? They are completely opposite in all values, or at least it appears that way. I, I mean, the reason is because you don't. First of all, there's two questions there. You love your authentic self. How do you be your authentic self and still like and love your child? Oh, that's the question. I'm going to reread the question because I read it wrong. How do you be your authentic self and still love or like your child when they're malcontented and they lie and they steal? The answer is you work. You get your needs met somewhere else. You don't rely on them to fill up your emotional bucket. This person who asked the question, I feel you. I am you. I could have written this question in a sense. It's hard. It's not easy. Loving people takes work. It's not just a feeling. I'm going to end the evening or end this question with the quote from Gandhi that I love that I think I read last time, but I'm going to read it again because I love it so much. He said, and I'm going to read it slowly, a coward is incapable of exhibiting love. It is the prerogative of the brave. Projection, fusion, going home is easy. Sameness is easy. Likeness is easy. Those are my two additions. Back to Gandhi. Loving another's otherness is heroic. And if we love other as other, we have heroically taken on the responsibility for our own differentiation, for our own journey. And this heroism may properly be called love. It is a heroic task to love another human, to stay married to a flawed, wounded, defended person, to allow yourself as a flawed, wounded, defended person to be loved. It's a heroic effort and it takes work. And our children who struggle more, as you know, they need love even more. So you've got more work to do. You've got to garner more support. You've got to learn to take care of yourself better so that you're not expecting them to do it for you. You've got to take responsibility for your own feelings, your own anger, your own disappointment, your own resentment. I'm not saying that those feelings are irrational or wrong. They're well deserved. But it's your responsibility to take care of them, not your child. And if you believe and treat your child like it's their job to make you not angry, it's their job to make you not resentful, that's the poison in the first place. That's the enmeshment. That's the fusion. That's the attachment fracture. So you go out and you get happy and you come to the relationship happy and patient and loving. And it takes effort and energy. Like I have said many, many times, in self-help, all of the press, all of the ink goes toward telling us that we need to be honest and vulnerable and share our truth. That is an important part of intimacy and relationships. It's an important part of healing and growing. But here's the thing they don't say. The harder part of the equation that's also required is containing. In fact, that's going to be the next topic after couples and co-parenting. Containing. Write that down, Malia. We'll add that to the schedule. Containing is a therapeutic word for being patient, not reacting, not getting triggered, holding time and space for somebody else. Not because they're mature or wise or insightful, but because they're broken. And you better believe that effort takes as much, if not more, effort and energy than telling the truth, although both are critical and essential parts of the process. So, thank you for that last question. As always, folks, I hope this is a helpful point of contact for you midweek. I hope this helped you in your process and your growth. I'm just giving to you something that somebody gave to me. This is not my theory. This is the theory of the masters. This is what psychology was, what it has been before we got very detailed about how to fix people. This is the idea about how people are, what it means to be a human being and love another person. So I hope it's a helpful part in your journey. And as always, for and in behalf of the people that you love And the people that love you, thanks for coming and showing up and being willing to do your work. Have a great evening. I'll talk to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.